The dark psychology of rich people. It is safe to say that all, if not most of us, want to be wealthy to some extent. In terms of how wealthy, this varies. But what most people don't understand is that wealthy people make up a small percentage of the population, meaning that they are at the top end of the extreme. To be at the top end of the extreme means they are very different from everyone else who makes up the majority. This means that they have extreme traits that differentiate them from everyone else, which a lot of us don't seem to realize, and some of these traits are psychological traits that most people would deem very toxic in today's world. What you have to realize is that to be different, or, in the case of wealthy people, in the upper extreme, requires an extreme way of thinking unlike the majority. If you think like the majority and act like the majority, then you will be part of the majority. A lot of us think we are different, but in actuality, we are more similar than dissimilar. A small example is that you probably think narcissism is a bad thing when it is not. In fact, it is something that is found in most rich people, according to studies. Many of us say we want to be rich, but our actions suggest the opposite. This is why I say we are more similar than dissimilar, and by looking at the traits of wealthy people, it suggests that in order for you to be a part of that small percentage requires a shift in your way of thinking, which will more than likely be uncomfortable as it is quite abnormal. So let's break down the dark psychology of rich people and the traits they tend to possess, and you can decide whether it is something you want to implement into your own life. Narcissism. Narcissistic is a word that the majority of people do not want to be associated with, as this for many is a red flag. However, everyone inherently has narcissism within them. It's just that some people have more than others. With extremely wealthy people, however, narcissism exists at extremely higher levels than normal. Narcissism is essentially the overinflated interest and admiration for one's own abilities. Rich people are very self-centered and prioritize their own interests above others. In philosophy, wealthy people would be referred to as solipsistic, which is an extreme form of subjective idealism in which they believe that only they exist in the world and their opinions and beliefs are superior to others. Because of this view, they tend to believe that their goals, opinions, and personalities should be able to influence the world and their own outcomes. Their high level of narcissism will make the outside world see them as very selfish and obnoxious. It is so extreme that they take responsibility for everything they do, whether good or bad. If an achievement happens, they are responsible, and if failure happens, they are also responsible. Most other people would rather not take responsibility when failure happens and would rather redirect the blame elsewhere, but the wealthy person takes responsibility for everything. The wealthy person wants ultimate control, so redirecting responsibility elsewhere to them is a loss of control. They have a higher internal locus of control, meaning that the things that happen in their lives are greatly influenced by their own abilities and actions. For example, they are more likely to agree with statements such as, "I determine how much I achieve in life," compared to "what you acquire is determined by luck or fate." The problem the majority of us have is that we do not like to take responsibility for outcomes and are quicker to delegate it to everyone else but ourselves, which is not in line with wealthy people. Those at the higher ends of the spectrum have higher levels of narcissism, which the majority would deem an undesirable trait. However, this undesirable trait is part of the reason they are where they are. Neuroticism. Neuroticism refers to one's general tendency towards negative emotions. A person, for example, who has frequent mood swings, worries a lot, and is easily disturbed would be considered highly neurotic. Those who are wealthy are generally seen to have very low levels of neuroticism, meaning that they show little to no emotion most of the time. I mean, when you think about it, being able to do things at a high level, for example, in sports, running a business, or anything where the stakes are high, will naturally require you to be very calm and composed in order to be successful. If you are rash, extremely sensitive, and unable to handle pressure, it is very likely you will not be able to handle big tasks or challenges, one of which is being wealthy. Some of the most successful people seem as if they are cold, unable to express much emotion, which goes hand in hand with narcissism. They will tend to care mainly about their ideology and not other people's opinions on it. How many times do you see in others or even yourself having an idea or goal, but then not committing to it because of other people's opinions? You may want to start a business in a certain field, but a friend or family member may discredit it due to a lack of understanding, and now you are no longer as enthusiastic about the idea. This applies to the majority of people, which is one of the reasons they are not in that small group of wealthy people. The wealthy person not only has a small form of delusion about their ideas, but they also have no care in the world what anyone thinks about them. They are completely unbothered. This lack of care makes them seem very cold to the outside world, as it seems as if they do not care about anything or anyone, when in reality, they are just in their own bubble, not allowing anyone to enter. This low level of neuroticism also helps wealthy people, as it makes them care less about upsetting others when it comes to business, as they will easily be able to sack employees, for example, or reject others and feel little to no empathy about their choices. For the majority of people, this will be a lot harder, as we are more sensitive and sympathetic to people and their circumstances, meaning we are more likely to accommodate them, even if it doesn't make financial sense to us. Agreeableness. Agreeableness is a personality trait that is characterized by being kind, caring, and trusting. It is about how easy it is to make you go along with the ideas of others, even if they don't match your own, or how willing you are to do things for others, even if it is at your expense. For example, buying items from a shop because all of your peers are, even though you know you don't want them, or they are outside of your budget. An agreeable person would comply with these demands quicker and easier. Wealthy people are extremely non-agreeable, meaning they are less likely to agree with the ideas of others unless those ideas match their own. Wealthy people are more than comfortable with the hostility and backlash they may receive for not agreeing with the ideas of others, and it is safe to say that most people generally do not share this same trait. Naturally, as humans, we want to be more agreeable and fit in with our environments to not seem weird or be judged by everyone else. It is way easier to just conform to the opinions of everyone else. Could you imagine telling your family that you have different religious views compared to them and be willing to go on your own path because of that? It would be a whole lot easier to just be agreeable and follow their beliefs. But this is why many of us are not in the small percentage of people that are wealthy, because those in that small group are extremely non-agreeable. This non-agreeableness makes them seem very stubborn, hostile, perhaps weird and hard to understand because they think very differently to the majority of people. And whilst it may seem cool to look different, it is far easier to just conform to the ideas and opinions that everyone else has to avoid the judgment and resentment you would face as a result of your non-agreeableness. However, this trait is what those who are wealthy share, which is a trait that is not as easy as it seems to adopt to yourself. It's all well and good to be non-agreeable and different until you face friction from your peers because of your ways of thinking. Conscientiousness. People who are diligent, well-organized, ambitious, and preserving are described as being conscientious. As you could imagine, this is a trait that wealthy people have in abundance. They say that the only difference between successful people and those who are not successful is that unsuccessful people quit when the going gets tough, whereas successful people persevere until the end, no matter what obstacle they face. The key trait to being conscientious is perseverance. Wealthy people have a perseverance that makes them seem insane to others. They keep striving towards their goals like their lives depended on it, which comes at the cost of their friends and family, as they are more likely to socialize less with them and do activities with them, as they are solely focused on their goals. This focus is so intense that they seem like addicts, as the first and last thing on their minds every day is where they are striving to be in the future, and they do not stop thinking about it until they have reached that end goal. On top of that, they plan to detail, are very diligent on that journey, meaning they know exactly where they want to be and how they are going to get there and are prepared to face any obstacles head-on. The majority of us, on the other hand, don't have that urgency to get to our goals, and while we may want to become successful, our actions suggest the opposite. How willing are you to cancel fun plans and social events with your peers to sit inside and do boring work for 6 hours instead? To most of us, that is not very appealing, so we will choose the first option, and for that reason, we won't be in the small percentage of people who are wealthy. It is that extra 20% of effort people put in that makes them successful. For example, the footballer who stays behind after training for a couple of hours, practicing their shooting while everyone else has gone home to get ready to go out to party. This is synonymous with the person who is wealthy, as they put in that extra effort compared to their peers, making them more conscientious. So a summary of the dark psychology of rich people is that they are narcissistic. They place their own beliefs and abilities above others, have low levels of neuroticism. They are quite cold, display less emotion, and are carefree when it comes to the opinions of others. They are non-agreeable, very stubborn, and very rarely conform to the ideas of others. They are willing to face confrontation when defending their own. They are very conscientious, diligent, and persevering when pursuing their goals, and they are willing to commit to them even if it means disappointing others in the process. Many of us have the skills to become rich but lack the traits and principles to sustain wealth, some of which are the ones explained in this video. So, are you willing to adopt these traits?